OK, so what was Joe Hockey up to this week when he, put the family trust thing up the flagpole and didn't even leave it there long enough to salute it? What was he on about?
A bit more policy freelancing from Joe, I think, which he's been a bit prone to do over the last little while on one issue or another, and I think it was the final straw for some of his colleagues.
But he wasn't thinking, obviously. I mean,
But it was a speech. He must have thought.
It was a speech.
Yeah, but surely he would have, if he thought about it in terms of coalition politics and conservative politics, he would have known that there was going to be a pretty strong and instant reaction from the National Party and also from some in the Liberal Party.
Well, there's a little bit of history going back a few weeks over the carbon tax and the winding back of the tax cuts.
Oh, yes, yeah.
There was a meeting of all the shadows involved in climate change to discuss, what they would say when it came to the question of winding back the tax cuts. And they all agreed that they weren't going to address it. It was a hypothetical question.
Hypothetical, that was the argument.
Well, they were hypothetical tax cuts to a hypothetical carbon tax, so why get bogged down in this issue? So they had this meeting that went for about half an hour. Everybody agreed. There was a bit of a stoush between Hockey and Truss at that meeting. And then a couple of hours later, Joe goes on national television and says, yep, we're going to wind back the tax cuts.
Whereas Andrew Robb goes on radio and says it's hypothetical.
And they all thought, well, what was all that about? So they were a bit, ticked off about that. So when he went out there on Truss again, they thought, right, that's it.
Well, what is it about? Is it about, some say it's Joe Hockey pressing his leadership capacity, or is it Joe Hockey trying to fend off Andrew Robb, who's made no secret of the fact that he thinks he's better credentialed
of that.
Shadow Treasurer?
I think
well, this is how Joe Hockey handled the issue the next morning on the Sunrise program.
Should Truss be taxed?
If you're having an overall review of the taxation system, you've got to consider everything.
Right.
That's our policy. Our policy.
Back on the
lower, simpler and fairer taxes, Koshy.
Except on trust.
Well, I've said what I've said. I stand by what I've said. But I say to you...
You've said three different things.
No, I haven't. You can try it. You're not going to get away with this.
I've never had a family trust. I'm not an expert or even, particularly knowledgeable about the taxation of trusts, but I've never been persuaded when people have talked about it that there needs to be a change, a big change in the way trusts are taxed. So the proposition that all trusts are tax dodgers is just not right.
Right, so that's a no from Malcolm Turnbull. And then Lindsay Tanner and Malcolm Fraser on Friday night, a couple of former politicians, had this to say about the discussion.
Politicians do what gets them publicity. What awaits a politician of serious substance who puts out the kind of propositions you put is either huge internal controversy within their party or more likely glorious irrelevance. For example, how much debate has there been in the last few days about the taxation of family trusts? There's been virtually zero discussion about the content of that issue, but lots of discussion about whether Joe Hockey has been humiliated, has had to backflip back down, etc., etc.
But partly that comes out in that way because Joe Hockey just put that out into the atmosphere. There was no argument about it. We'll just tax family trusts. Joe's statement had no substance.
And I take Lindsay Tanner's point, but we didn't have time to have a debate about the merits of the family trust. We put it up there and took it down before the debate got started.
And Malcolm Fraser's point is a good one too. If you're going to bring forward a big weighty issue, if you really want to do that, argue it. Don't just back down. Argue it. Sell your case.